Happy Friday, a good Friday to you. It's Tyler Jones here. Thanks for joining us. Coming up on today's show, we will catch you up to speed on the latest Seattle Seahawks news and rumors as we are talking Frank Clark, Poona Ford, also Jalin Hyatt on today's show. We'll go over all of that coming up in just a few moments. Before we officially start the show, though, I need a favor from you. I need you to share this video because we want to make sure that as many Seahawk fans as possible can see what we're doing so they know the latest happenings on your favorite team. And so here's what I'll do. For everyone that shares the show today and tags me on Twitter, at Tyler Jones Live, you can see my Twitter username right there. Click the share button, select the Twitter icon, click post to tweet. Tag me on Twitter, and I will shout you out on a later edition of Seahawks Today sometime next week. So if you do that, that would help us out and get this show to as many people possible and be a great way to start off the weekend. Frank Clark, could he be making his return to the Seattle Seahawks? Bleacher Report has named Seattle as Frank Clark's top free agent destination. Interesting, right? Remember, he started his career with the Seahawks, went on to the Kansas City Chiefs, won 2 Super Bowl titles, was a pivotal part of the Chiefs Super Bowl runs. They definitely wouldn't have won that first Super Bowl without him. Probably the one this year, they wouldn't have won without him either. With that said, here's more from Christopher Knox on the possibility. The Seahawks only have $7.2 million in cap space available, but they could indeed be inclined to make room for Clark. Seattle has yet to add a dedicated edge rusher this offseason, and it obviously it's open to bringing back familiar players. Linebacker Bobby Wagner just re-signed. Frank Clark, former second-round pick, and not only did he have the 2 Super Bowl titles with Kansas City, but also was a 3-time Pro Bowler with the franchise as well. So things went pretty good for Kansas City of what they got out of Frank Clark as far as that goes. Let's show you some of the numbers from Frank Clark. And, you know, he did get the Super Bowls, but he was most impactful in the postseason. As you can see, you go back to 2019, 8 sacks. That was a big deal of what he was able to do with 37 tackles that season, but his numbers kind of just stayed steady. 6 sacks in 2020, 4.5 in 2021, and then 5 sacks in 2022. For Frank Clark, he was good there in Kansas City, but he wasn't over the top great. And, you know, one thing I would think about this, with the inconsistencies, he's had that go on throughout his career, but he's also had multiple legal issues as well, dating all the way back to his days when he was at the University of Michigan. So a lot for Seattle to take into account here. Do you want a player that is a little bit older, like Frank Clark is now, not compared to when you had him previously, and then the legal issues, and then what's he willing to play for? Can you afford him? Would he take a discount or less money? Can you work that into the equation? That's a lot of hurdles to climb potentially for Seattle. You get the good with the bad, essentially, when it comes to Frank Clark. So let's ask you, should the Seahawks bring back Frank Clark? Should he make a return to Seattle? This is our pinned comment today. You might get an ad break. If so, take advantage of it. Type Y for yes, type N for no. Let me know in the comment section if you want to see Frank Clark back in Seattle or not. Y for yes, N for no. Meanwhile, Bleacher Report has named Seattle as defensive tackle Poona Ford's top free agent destination. This was in the same article that they named Frank Clark as the top destination for Poona Ford. Poona Ford, obviously a free agent now and evaluating his options of where he could potentially go. Could he end up back in Seattle as well? Here's more from Christopher Knox. Keeping Ford in the defensive line rotation would be a very smart move. The Seahawks could use all of the help they can get up front after ranking 30th in rushing yards allowed and 26th in yards per carry allowed, 4.9 last season. Poona Ford, the last 2 years, had 88 tackles, 12 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, and 22 quarterback hurries. And kind of like what we talked about a moment ago with Frank Clark, one thing to look at is that it's all about the money, right? I mean, Pete Carroll has already flat out said that he wants Poona Ford back. And if they can make it work, I don't see why not. Even if you draft Jalen Carter and put him in position to be your starting defensive tackle, if Poona Ford wants to be there and Pete wants to make it happen, if you can make that money work, Poona Ford can still be a very good player in this league. And I think about this too. One thing to keep in mind with all this is Poona Ford's not that old in actuality. I think that because there's so much young players and that we've seen this roster turnover a lot within the last couple of years, we associate Poona Ford as being a part of the old regime of some sorts. But in actuality, he's not that old, so he still has some good football left in him as far as I'm concerned. Should the Seahawks re-sign Poona Ford? What say you? Let me know in the comment section. Type S for sign, type P for pass. What do you think? Should the Seahawks bring back Poona Ford or not? Tell me in the comment section below. The NFL Draft coming up just around the corner, and draft hats are on sale now just for your liking. Whether you want to wear the baseball hat style or if you want to do the flat bill in the blue or the white, either one, we have you covered. These are the exact same draft hats that you are going to see future Seattle Seahawks wearing on draft night. So you can go ahead and order yours now and get it in time for draft day so you can wear yours and be ahead of the curve. So when you're showing up to the draft party, when you're with your buddies and everything, you're like, look, I already got this. I got the same hat that they're wearing as well. So you might as well get yours now while supplies last. Chatsports.com/Seahawks draft to get yours today. That's chatsports.com/Seahawks draft. And one final note before we wrap up today. Jalin Hyatt, wide receiver from Tennessee, has been named by ESPN as the best fit for the Seattle Seahawks with the 37th overall selection. Now, think about this with Hyatt, folks. His name has come up of being a potential end of the first round pick. And we know Seattle has that selection at 20. So if Hyatt is around at 37, that's pretty interesting, right? You have a need for that number 3 receiver spot. And not using a first-round pick to fill that need, I think this makes a lot of sense. Let's read what Matt Bowen had to say from ESPN about this possibility. Hyatt would add a true vertical element from both slot and boundary alignments in Seattle's 11 personnel sets to mesh with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. With Hyatt bringing even more speed and big play ability to the pass game for quarterback Geno Smith, the Seahawks could see more two-deep shells that would open up the run front for Kenneth Walker III and impact the offense there too. The numbers from Jalin Hyatt this past season were outstanding. That Tennessee offense was great. Remember, they ended up going to the Orange Bowl and competed in the SEC. It was a historic year for the Tennessee Volunteers, and Jalin Hyatt was a big part of that. Nearly 19 yards of reception, 15 touchdowns, close to 1,300 yards receiving, 67 receptions. And, you know, I was talking to a friend of mine, Keegan Renault, on my podcast this week. And Keegan he's a data analyst for the NFL Draft and runs a data company. And Keegan was telling me that when you looked at the receivers in this year's draft, there are a lot of good number 2 receivers that it's hard to find the necessary number 1 standout. And Jalin Hyatt, to me, if you're picking in the second round and Hyatt's there, and in Seattle's case, they're looking for a number 3 receiver and a number 2 eventually when Tyler Lockett moves on at some point down the road, Hyatt, I think, is a good fit for where Seattle's at. Yes, they need a receiver, but it's not their highest priority. And the numbers are right up there with some of the better receivers that are in this draft. So for me, that makes a lot of sense of Hyatt with that second-round pick, if he's still around, potentially speaking. And then you can take care of the other things. You can go ahead and prioritize defense with those 2 first-round picks and do it that way and still get your offense better. And we saw what the offense did this past year. Adding Hyatt to the equation would only make this offense more lethal. So before we go, would you draft Jalin Hyatt in the second round? What do you think about that idea? Here's what I need you to do. Tell me in the comment section. Type D for draft. Type R for reject. Okay? Be honest with me. What do you think about that possibility of Jalin Hyatt in the second round? We're not asking you about a first-round pick. In the second round. I'm all in favor of this. Let me know what you think. D for draft, R for reject. Follow me on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Tyler Jones Live. You can find me there. And have a great Easter, great Passover. I'll see you next time here on the channel. Appreciate you joining us, and have a great one.